Christian, let me ask you, you've covered the media for a long time. How unusual, how extreme are the circumstances we face right now?
Unusual, in that the extremity comes from the United States. Usually, you know, I've been a foreign correspondent all my life, and I've actually existed in these kinds of high tribalism, these kind of situations of, you know, high stakes tribalism, where journalists are pulled into political corners, even without wanting to be. But I'm talking about local journalists in countries like Turkey, in countries like Egypt, in countries like Russia, and on and on and on, where if you do not sort of abide by what the prevailing political winds say, then you're out of work. You're in jail, out of work, or whatever. Hasn't quite got that bad here yet, but there is a sense of tribalism that is very, very strange, actually, to be in the middle of as a foreign correspondent. And worse, to be frank, is a sense, for the very first time, certainly in my memory and my experience, that the undemocratic forces around the world, and I put this to Kellyanne Conway on the first show, the undemocratics, the dictators, those who have no respect for a free and independent press, are for the first time ever getting enabled by the President of the United States of America, who's traditionally always gone around to these very countries and spoken in favor of a free and independent press, has gone out and defended the work of a free press and asked these leaders to lighten up and let up on their own press. That's always been a central plank of American diplomacy, human rights, and all the rest of it. So that's why it's really, really different, not to mention the added layer, which is alternative facts and fake news, AKA news I don't like about myself.
Walter, let me ask you about this. It seems, and especially your background as a news executive, the news cycle seems to move faster and faster and faster. What are we losing, and what could this program do?
Well, that's the whole point of this program, is when we're spending every 24 hours recycling the latest dumb tweet, it's nice to pause for a second and let's have some conversations where people are thinking more seriously. If you look at the history of this, you know, we've gone through times like this before. I mean, we've gone through the 60s, both with civil rights and Vietnam, but there the press was pretty well trusted, and if Cronkite even made a slight comment, it became big news. But before that, the press was very adversarial at times. Even Edward R. Murrow helped take down Joe McCarthy. And I think we're in a period like that again, as opposed to even the 60s. Is that bad? We need shows in which there is some common ground, where people have an open mind when they're asking a question, and where people try to present ideas rather than talking points. And I think between social media and the 24-hour news cycle, we've lost that in most of our media. It's just become kind of polarizing and, in some ways, disgusting.
Michelle, as journalists, we are trained to go after the who, what, when, where part of the story. That comes easier to us. But the why part of it, maybe we don't get at enough. Is that something you think about and you think this show can really dive into?
I think that, you know, there are conversations that you have in the family, and then there are conversations you have with everybody else. I mean, let's just be honest. This is one of those conversations we've been having in the family for quite a long time, and I'm sure you all are having it too. Thinking about, you know, where are we falling short between what we think the public really needs and what we're actually able to provide. So, you know, I think, like all of us, I'm really excited about the chance to just spend a little bit more time, you know, slow down a little bit. I mean, I'm very proud of the work that I do for NPR. I think we're all proud of the work that we do for our respective outlets. But, you know, there's a saying, you know, the one thing they're not making more of is time. Well, here we're making more time. We're making more time to sit and live with some ideas. And I think that in itself is modeling a different kind of conversation. Like when I looked at, Christiane, your conversation with, first with Nancy Pelosi and then with Kellyanne Conway, and you're not gonna like everything that either of these people has to say, some more than others. But, but the fact that you're having a serious conversation with these consequential people models a different kind of conversation. And I think that that's something that we all benefit from, even if we don't necessarily articulate it that way. And so.
Alicia, it seems to me that even all journalists, we tend to go back to familiar faces and familiar voices. How important is it to find new voices, and what can the show do about that?
I think it's really critical, and it's one of the big opportunities that this show has. So, for example, you saw a clip of Michael Arsenault. That was my first interview. Michael is a New York Times best-selling author, but he's probably a face that you haven't seen before, and yet he has a big social following. He has people who've been following his writing for the last 10 years, and there was something he kept saying during our interview that will stay with me forever, which is, Michael's Black, he grew up working class, in Texas, Catholic, very, very religious family, and he kept saying, well, people like me aren't supposed to be here. And I said, Michael, you've said that about 5 times over the course of this interview. What do you mean by that? And he was like, well, I mean, I have the merit to be here. I deserve to be here. But people like me don't often get invited into spaces like this. My voice is not always seen as an important voice. And so I think it's one of the opportunities and responsibilities of the show to bring people like that to the PBS audience.
Hara, you've actually maybe longer than anybody else on PBS have really interested in social media, have thought about technology. Technology already has played a big role in politics of today and the press. Where do you see it going forward, and what's the press's responsibility as we look at technology?
Well, I think it's to put it in perspective, that it's not the panacea, it's a tool like anything else. I mean, we wouldn't, cast any kind of generalization on medical technology or any other financial technology, right? But I think it's about empowering the audience enough to get them informed, to say, hey, these are the consequences of all the digital exhaust that you're actually generating, that someone is monetizing that no products are actually free. Your information is incredibly valuable to lots of these companies, and they're going to make lots of decisions whether you consented directly or not. So it's really about just preparing people for the fact that this is one of the ways that the world is changing around them, and whether they like it or not, they're participants in it. So if you at least have some understanding of what it is that you're transacting, perhaps you can be a better informed consumer and a better citizen.
Christian, in terms of the ability to talk to someone with whom you disagree, that seems to be a vanishing art somehow on television. How do you think about it, and how important is it?
I think about it a lot, and I wish I was better at it, and I wish we all got to do more of it, and not necessarily in an adversarial mud wrestling kind of way. People are going to know where you stand on issues and things like that. But I do actually think it's massively important, because what I fear in this hyper-partisan world that we live in right now, and I called it tribalized, it is tribalized, I fear that each and every segment, and technology has enabled this, each and every segment of the population has been able to find its own echo chamber, its own route to just stay within its own intellectual and emotional silo. And I find that really very, very dangerous, because that wasn't the same. I started at CNN 35 years ago today. And CNN was the big technological revolution at the time. We brought news and democratized information for the world. And that's Ted Turner's great gift to the world, and great gift to humanity, frankly. He was able to take television to especially state-run nations where there was no free press, no free pluralistic politics, nothing, where people just got their information from their own state-run propaganda. And he was able to dive through that, which meant that people got to hear things that either they didn't believe in, didn't know existed, couldn't believe was being told about their own, political system or whatever. And so I've kind of grown up with that in my DNA. I really do think we must not just be this political side or that political side. We must try to explore all avenues. And I'd say that not just because it's politically correct to say that, not just because it's intellectually honest as journalists, but because we are actually confronting the problem where where people are getting just their own kinds of news. If you look at vital issues like climate, for instance, I was stunned to read out to Governor Jerry Brown that the latest poll says, and I'm going to get it wrong, but it's some ridiculously small percentage of Republicans who believe that even climate change exists, and the number is dropping, whereby in the 70s and the 80s, the idea that there was climate change and everybody was involved and was actually a vote winner for both parties. And it's completely changed now. So we cannot carry on and expect our civilization to thrive and to continue to exist if there is this constant war of information. So I do think we absolutely must establish a benchmark for truth, facts, empirical evidence, and the lot, but also talk to each side so each side sees and hears the story of the other. And maybe if each side can hear some of the fears, some of the emotions, some of the, sort of paradigm that the other side lives in, maybe there's a place where you could reach out your hand or step over the gulf and try to bridge it.